communications and PR. I started on the PR agency side, worked in Dallas for about 5 years. My wife and I decided if we were going to get married, it'd be nice if we were in the same place. So she was living in Tulsa. I got a job for Thrifty Car Rental headquarters. I actually worked in corporate for them for about 17 years. First with Thrifty, then with the parent company. So I did that for about 17 years. Went off, worked about 18 months for Saxum, and then got sucked into the TPS machine. So that's kind of my story. I was at TPS for once I actually joined Dr. Ballard there. I was then there for another 5.5 years, and I just in December, my counterpart at Union said, "Hey, I'm retiring, and how would you like to take my place?" And I jumped ship. So anyway, but I really enjoyed, I have to say, I really enjoyed my time at TPS. There are some amazing people there, and it's a great place too. So just a little bit about Union. I went from the biggest to the 7th biggest, but still do much of the same work. Union's got about 16,000 students. There's a little bit of a difference between serving 16,000 and 40,000. The student mix is a little bit different. TPS is really about a third African American, third Caucasian, and actually Hispanic for the first time is actually just slightly above that. So a lot of changes happening. Union is really having these same changes. A lot of growth in East Tulsa. With the Hispanic population, they're doing a lot of really good. I feel like they've kind of gotten, my sense of it is, now having been internal at both places, I think they kind of got a jump on things, maybe, I don't want to say better, it's just been done in a different way. But anyway, as you can see, the mix is just a little bit different there. I have found in talking, it's kind of funny how when you go to work for a suburban school district, there are a lot of assumptions made, and I am finding that a lot of the people that I talk to think Union is the way that it was about 20 years ago. It has changed hugely. I was talking to a reporter with NPR who is from Oklahoma, who said, "Oh, I know Union. You know, you're the rich suburban school district." And it was like, "When did you leave Oklahoma?" And he said, "Well, it's about 18 years ago." And I said, "Well, I've got some new information for you, because things are very, very different from what you know." So things have really changed a lot. I have 3 daughters who are all 7 years apart. And we actually lived. The irony was, I lived in the Union School District while I worked at TPS. So I have seen the huge changes, seen the number of parents that don't speak English, which was a change with my youngest child. It was like, oh my gosh, wow. It was just very unexpected. So I know it has changed a lot. Just some stats for you guys to see. One thing that's really important, and this is true with both Union and Tulsa Public Schools, any good communications plan, Dr. Ballard was talking a lot about it's important to have the right people on the bus, to have the culture that you want to have, and a lot of that, all of this stuff has to work together. Developing a strategic plan. I have gone in and replaced my TPS stuff with Union because I feel like I probably should do that, but it's the same stuff. It's still, you have to decide what your organization is going to be. You have to decide those things that you're going to prioritize and what your vision is going to be, and everything should come from that, should be filtered through that. So when you're out there representing yourself, your organization, you want everything that you do to be a reflection of that, regardless of where you're at. Unions is a little bit different. Their mission statement is to graduate 100% of our students college and or career ready. Have we hit the 100% yet? No. But I know both Union and TPS are doing things to really try to hone in on those students that are falling through the cracks and really going to some pretty dramatic lengths to fix that. These are the core values at Union. I'm not going to walk through every one of these. Here are the key areas of focus. Early childhood, community schools, STEM, and college and career readiness.
I hate to interrupt speakers, but pay attention to what he just showed you. Because typically I do bring Kurt Hartzler. For years I used Kathy Bergman, who was a longtime superintendent at Tulsa Union. And I typically use Hartzler. And Kurt and I have had a lot of exchange by text, but he's out of town now. I don't know if he's going to be able to speak. And what I wanted you to hear from him, you're hearing from Chris. And that is, and you heard it from Raleigh. Well, you heard it indirectly from Raleigh, but when Raleigh talked about Clifton Tolbert, I had Clifton Tolbert help us with our strategic plan one year. That's why he nodded at me, because he knew that I knew Clifton Tolbert. But strategic planning is so important to district level leadership. And Raleigh kind of indirectly talked about it, and now Chris Payne. What he's saying is just so valid, because he's saying it wasn't that much different whenever I left TPS, because we knew to do strategic planning. We knew to do it, and we stuck by it. So I have to make this point, that when he says Union emphasizes 4 areas, everything emanates from that. Everybody talks the same language. It's like Raleigh was saying. That's what Chris Payne is telling you right now. And since we're likely not going to hear from Hartzler, well, we're hearing from someone who's very high up on his leadership team that's telling you that. So I want to make that point, Christopher.
Yeah, and these are really kind of the 4 pillars that we really are basing everything around. One thing that's important to mention, and I can attest to the fact that both of the school districts that I have worked for have done this very same thing. I don't know if you read the newspapers when TPS was going through their strategic planning. We had a ton of community meetings. There were tons of opportunities for people to weigh in and talk about what they thought was important that kids know in the 21st century. A lot of in-person meetings, a lot of survey type information. Really good plans you don't just do under a bubble somewhere and not involve people. It's not one person sitting at a desk. It really is something that's a collaborative process, and I know both of these districts have done plans that way, so can attest to that. And then these are some of the measures. Union's latest plan, they're going into the 5th year of their 5-year plan, and we'll be doing a new one for another 5 years. But right now, Union's graduation rate, we're doing more of a 3-year look, because there are some of these students that would be falling through the cracks, but we are tracking them down and taking every opportunity to help them graduate. It's currently at 90%. We're not at 100, but we're making a lot of progress on this. So we're ending up with 5th year seniors and that kind of thing. But to us, it's important. We want to get everybody to graduate that can. And just some other numbers that we would share here. All right. As a matter of fact, outsiders are beginning to notice. I don't know if you saw this, Dr. Ballard. The New York Times did a story in April. They had come out. They started looking at our early childhood.
I did see that. I did read that.
Excellent article. David Kirk was telling our new Betsy DeVos, telling her, hey, you need to let up on charters. There are actually some public schools that are actually knocking it out of the park.
Chris, I need to quit interrupting you. I do mentoring work in the National Superintendent's Organization. I have 6 mentees that I work with for an 18-month period. In fact, I'm going to Chicago next week for 4 days, and I'll be working with these and the others that are in the Midwest cohort. I actually sent them this article.
Oh, good.
And I don't just send articles, I send an article along with explanation about, impressions and how you're viewed and how you communicate, why union is viewed like this. So yeah, I did see it.
Well, and the phone, even better yet, the phone has been ringing. We've actually got people that have some money that are actually interested in being supported, which is always helpful in these times. Your book talks a little bit about putting together a media relations plan. My point in mentioning all of the mission statement stuff, all the strategic plan stuff, is that anything that you do should be an outgrowth of it. You're not going to design something that doesn't fit in with what your cultural beliefs are, what your plans are for the organization. In the PR realm that I work in, we may use some different nomenclature than you guys do, but we have what we call the 4-step process. It's essentially the same thing. The acronym is RPI. First, you go out and do research. This kind of helps you determine what your problems are, what are the things that you're trying, what are the issues that you're trying to solve. From that, you sit down and do some planning. You define who your audiences are. You develop objectives to talk about what the things are that you're going to set out to do as an organization. In setting objectives, you're putting a lot of numbers to this. You want to be able to say, hey, we want to improve, reading X% among X number of students by X period of time. Objectives are things like that. From that, you develop strategies on how to do it, and then tactics on how to carry that out. Then you go out and do implementation, and at the end, you go out and you evaluate and find out, did we indeed do what we set out to do? And in theory, the whole thing is just kind of rolling, and you then take your outcome and you figure out, okay, well, what do we do next? So it's kind of an ongoing kind of thing. Target audiences for a school district. When we sat down and did Project Schoolhouse, I think I had a week from meeting you, Dr. Ballard. I think within a week, I was tasked with having a communications plan, which was really kind of funny because it was like, oh my gosh, I've never done work for a school district before, so I was kind of starting from ground zero. But within a week, we had a communications plan. And part of that planning is sitting down and figuring out who are all the target audiences. Some of them are more important than others. They're not all created equal. Like in something like Project Schoolhouse, maybe state. I mean, there are some considerations, I guess, when you're talking about closing schools. There are some considerations at the state level, but by and large, those aren't probably the primary people that we're talking to. Now, you probably did some talking to them, but so anyway, but this is a pretty typical list of the kinds of audiences that we're going to be dealing with. Just a little bit about just my personal PR philosophy. Transparency is a huge thing. One thing, and I'll have another slide on this, but what is the first thing that you guys think about when I say PR, or I'm a PR person? What are the things that you associate with that? What are some words that you associate
Promotion.
with that? Promotion.
Crisis management.
Crisis management.
Spin.
Oh, I knew I'd get it. It only took 3.
Scott, what were you going to say?
I was thinking crisis management as well.
Okay.
I couldn't think of
And that's a biggie. That is a biggie. My premise, because I'm an honest person, my premise is spin, if you're a legitimate, honest PR person, is not something that we engage in. And in my experience, I've found it more common in the political realm, which is why when Dr. Ballard was saying we're dealing with honesty issues with our legislators, what realm do they come from? Political realm. So anyway, in my experience, I found a lot more spin. I don't even use the word that much, but I found a lot more spin in the political realm than in the real communications realm. News media can be a major ally. There are some people, people have different schools of thought on this. I'm not going to say that they're our best friend, but they can be a huge ally. I think the relationship that we have with the Tulsa World and with the other news media, we could really not have gotten Project Schoolhouse done if we had not had media that were helping us. When we were out there with Project Schoolhouse, at one point we had 3 different possible configurations in the newspaper. This still blows my mind. I have this in my stack of stuff at home. It still blows my mind. When we shared the 3 different plans that we were asking the public to choose between, it was literally 3.5 full pages of the newspaper. How often do you ever see that much space dedicated? Because there's so much complexity. That's something else we'll talk about when we talk about the strength of various media outlets, because TV is not a great place to talk about complex issues, detailed issues. Sometimes it is, some formats it is. But in television news, local TV news, when some stories are 7 seconds long, complexity is not something they do well. So anyway, my goal has always been to share as much as you can. I've always looked at my role as being one of a facilitator, where we share everything that we can. There are limitations on that. You've got FERPA issues, student privacy issues, so you always have to be mindful of that. We've had other issues that have been very complex. Well, we'll get to some more of those. You've got board policy issues, open records requirements. There are certain records that we are required by law to turn over. There are also, they can make demands upon you and say, hey, we need this by Friday, but the reality is it takes the time that it takes, and they can't really force you to do that. So anyway, there's a lot of issues that we have to deal with. But I do not view myself as a gatekeeper or a barrier to that. I see myself as more of a facilitator, because if you establish good relationships with the news media, they will be a huge help to you. And I've always found if you have a good reputation, you don't want to be developing a reputation, waiting to develop a reputation until you have a crisis. It's like, in your personal life, when you do that, who are you going to call when you need help if you don't have friends? You got to have friends before you get into trouble. So it's the same thing with a company, in an organization, a school district. I always tell people, this is really, the funny thing is people make all this stuff so complicated. It's really not that complicated. I mean, some of this stuff really is what you learn in kindergarten. I'm convinced of it. Get to know the reporters and media outlets who cover you. It's always very helpful to go out there. I mean, I have a little search that I do on Google that I run every day that pulls up stuff, and I've got all kinds of other resources. But go out there and really look and see what they're covering, what they're writing about, what are their biases. I know a lot of times the media prides themselves on not being biased. There's always been bias. First of all, don't fool yourself that there isn't. There used to be, when I was in journalism school, the bias was they were all liberal. Almost 80% of the news media were Democrats. Today, the media landscape is very different. We have very fractured media. We've got media that will cater to whatever belief system you correspond to, and if you want to hear, if you just want to hear conservative news with those views, you know, you're probably going to watch Fox. So it's a little bit different than it used to be. But it is helpful to get familiar with what they like, what they write about, and sometimes it's a chance to show them some other viewpoints, because what I found a lot of times is when a reporter comes to you, and I've even had this with, I used to work a lot with the New York Times when I worked for Thrifty, and it was always really interesting. Usually they will come to you with here's the story that I want to write. And it's always interesting because a lot of times the reality is the facts don't always line up with the story that they want to tell. And I have killed many a story or reframed the story with new information, because they really do appreciate people that have valid information. So that is where you can really show your value to them, is in being very open about these things. I have found that if you acknowledge your issues, warts and all, they actually appreciate that. I mean, all of us are a work in progress, aren't we? I mean, is there anyone doing anything that's perfect? Probably not. I think it's best to kind of own up to where you are and that you're working to fix issues, and here's how you're doing it. One big thing is they always have pretty tight deadlines. A lot of times, I used to hate it when the New York Times would call me. They always called at Friday at 2 o'clock, and they're on Eastern time. It's like, we need this in 2 hours. And there are times when you don't always have the information at hand, but deadlines are always a huge thing. And there are some reporters, that are kind of hands-off with PR people. They think that you're manipulating. They think that you're. I've always been very clear and upfront. I know, like when I was working with Andrea Eager at Tulsa World, one time she told me, she said, "You're not like other PR people that I work with." And I was always very upfront with her about, hey, you're only going to hear the truth from me. And I let her know very quickly, I'm an ethical person. I'm not going to bullshit you on something. If something is not right, I'm going to tell you. The only instances that I may have to withhold something are going to be because I can't give it to you yet. It might be a confidentiality issue. Sometimes there are timing issues. I can't tell you right now, but I'm going to tell you just as soon as I can. And they get to where they trust that if you're being fair with them. Crisis situations. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I can't talk about that. Crisis situations. I could generate probably 10 screens of the issues that we've dealt with over the years. I've dealt with a lot of them with this man over here. Oh my gosh, we've had gunmen suspected gunmen at Hale. We had a huge embezzlement issue. Boy, that was interesting. I had never dealt with one of those before. Those are interesting because, most crises that we deal with, I mean, think about things like a fire or an airline crashes or something like that. Usually those things have a window that's pretty narrow. Well, something like embezzlement, there's a lot of complexity in unraveling something like that. And it's very hard to keep news media at bay who want immediate answers when you have none to give. I think that little issue took about 1.5 years to unravel, I think, completely.
It was very, very, very complex. This Stephanie Spring issue, and she went to prison over embezzlement. We ended up letting every single person in the department go, but you have to follow all the procedures. Whenever you let people go, we had an investigator on it.
Well, there's nothing, and this
the
is the same.
FBI.
It's the same way with a lot of these issues. We've had issues with adults inappropriately touching children. Okay, think about that. Of course, the first consideration is, I mean, one at the top of the list is we've got to protect kids. So that's like first and foremost. But at the same time, and I've found this in my experience, at the same time, it seems like 50% of the time the allegations are true, but the other 50% of the time, they're not. So you can't jump to conclusions, so you also have to do some protecting of your employee, or at least be neutral on this subject. I mean, you can only acknowledge that you're investigating, or, usually you will suspend that person pending an investigation. But think about, I mean, these are not easy issues to deal with, and you really have to be very careful in how you treat
And we actually, whenever he said that, we actually had more than one coach picked up on a DUI.
My favorite one was the one that fell asleep at the Whataburger drive-through.
Yeah.
Yes, with a cop knocking on his window
Yep.
at 3 a.m. That was a Sunday call that I got. That was kind of fun. So,
And that
fun
was,
stuff.
following in the true tradition of all these Central coaches.
Oh, no.
I'm just
Oh,
kidding.
no.
I'm just
Oh, no.
kidding. No, he was a new Central coach, and that one we dismissed.
For a day?
Yeah.
Head coach for a day?
Yeah, head coach per day. I mean, that's really about right. And
Or
other
maybe a month.
other high-profile head coach, we did not dismiss. And so you have to be very meticulous, and you have to be fair, and you have to be consistent, and
You will have limitations on what you can share, and, but you have to be protective of your organization at the same time. It's some of these, it's 3 or 4 elements that you really have to kind of juggle and make the best call that.
be very consistent, very deliberate. And I'm just gonna tell you that on a Sunday morning, I got a telephone call from this coach, high profile. A lot of you know who I'm talking about. He called me and he said, I got a DUI last night. Here's exactly what happened. It was a long ways from being dead drunk at Whataburger with a policeman, knocking on your window. I hung up. Within 15 minutes, I got a call from our Director of Human Resources at the time, and she said, I don't know if you've heard, but this coach, it was in the newspapers, I don't know why I'm reluctant to say his name. This coach was picked up under DUI. I want you to know that I will go into the office later this afternoon and start dismissing papers. When you're the person in charge, you're the one responsible for laying everything out. I absolutely love this human resource person. She was just spectacular, and she was doing her job. But I'm the superintendent. I'm the one who has to lay it out, the final decision maker. You have processes that you go through, and you have people like Chris Payne, who's on your cabinet, that you seek input. And Chris was working. Oh my gosh, he was working closely with the media. And one person we summarily dismissed, and the other person is doing quite well in his career. There were extenuating circumstances, and it requires courage. The easy thing to do is to say, oh yeah, right, yeah, go in this afternoon, start dismissing papers, and we'll fire him Monday morning, because then I won't catch so much heat, But part of the reason I didn't catch heat by not dismissing that coach, I didn't take out discipline, was because, and you only have the luxury if you have a chief communications officer. But Chris Payne was the one working with the newspaper the whole time. And really, I would only work with him when Chris would, it would come through him to me, and I ended up being quoted by the media. But it's just,
Well, and I tried to do,
something to get into.
this is something else you get into, where another feeling I have about this is I always figure I can deal more directly with some of the bad news. I always try to protect my superintendent so they don't have to deal with those things, because I think they should be able to focus more on running a school district, talking about the proactive things things that we're doing. So part of the role is being protective. The other thing I didn't mention is, and this is another kind of philosophical thing, I always feel like I have a circle drawn around me, and one leg is inside the organization, being protective of it, but the other leg is kind of on the outside of that circle, and my job is to listen to what we're hearing from other audiences, from the publics, because a lot of times, and I think you guys have probably seen this in the organizations that you've been in, regardless of what they are, you find that a lot of times executives, people that are leading companies, sometimes they kind of lock themselves away in an ivory tower. You were not this way, but I had one individual I worked with, I mean, he was totally not looking at what was around him, and your role really should be to warn them of things that are out there and letting them know, hey, this is a huge issue. I share all of these things because as you look at all of these subjects, really the very best thing to do is to be proactive and anticipate the kinds of things that your organization could face. I mean, if you're in the school business, I mean, I can guarantee you there are certain crises that you better be ready for. A student with a gun, someone inappropriately touching a child, you may have a natural disaster, that's why we all have disaster plans. There are just certain things that you need to plan for.
That child buried under the swing was one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen in my career.
That was awful.
Precious little girl out digging a deep hole in the sand in the playground, and it collapsed.
Awful stuff. But you can plan for crises, and you just really need to anticipate. And I have actually sat down, I did this for our company when I was at Thrifty. I had previously, prior to 9/11, I had worked with a person that ran our department that said, every crisis is unique, you cannot prepare for crises. Well, 9/11 threw all of that out the window. And so I did this for a company and sat down and anticipated everything that could happen and actually wrote mock materials that could be adapted if that happened. So there are things you could do.
I want to comment on something here real quick, if I can, Chris. He says neighborhood activity that causes a school lockdown. I followed with a great deal of interest the Robert Bates, stuff that ended up sending him to prison. And so I'm rocking along following that. And the next thing I know, a very smart reporter, Andrea Eager, picks up that when they shot him, he ran this way, but he could have run this way. And if he would have run this way, he would have been running right toward a school, and shots were fired. And as soon as Andrea picked up on that, I don't remember if she went through you.
I don't think she did in that instance. I did. The funny thing is, Kim Jackson at Channel 8 actually picked up on it that very day and said, Chris, why was that school not on lockdown? If memory serves me correctly, I don't think it was.
Well, it wasn't.
Very well.
And here's where having a good relationship with a reporter can work to your advantage. I said, Andrea, I won't comment on this. I won't leave you hanging. If you want to comment from the school superintendent, I'll do it. And I'm sure I talked with Chris about it because sometimes I make comments without it. Sometimes I can be a little.
We're on the same page.
Yeah, we were always on the same page. And I work pretty well with the media, so Chris gave me some latitude. And I said, look, I don't want to be in the middle of this big fight over Stanley Lanes, who I know, and Robert Bates. I don't want to be in the middle of it. But I do think that you deserve a quote, but I don't think it needs to be the headline. So I would appreciate it if we could treat it that way. You're at their mercy. Do you have a good relationship with them or not? And if you do, they'll listen to you on issues like that. So sure enough, it was in the story, but it wasn't the headline. It wasn't TPS superintendent expresses alarm over, the way the deputies handle it, because if he would have run the other way, well, instead it just said, TPS superintendent Dr. Keith Ballard did say that they hadn't been notified,
And we hadn't, and we should have been. Hell, they shouldn't have been out there a block from the school or 2 blocks from the school. They set it out. They set up the sting. And I like Stanley Glass, but it's all history now. Bates is in prison, and Stanley's out of office, so it's all history now. But we could have been drug in on it. And it's important that you understand what I'm saying, that you form relationships with people so that you're not drug in on this. And it was mentioned that I did express concern about us not being informed, and that was really about the last that we had on it.
Well,
See,
and
Chris
I'm
handles it
surprised.
with Kim Jackson, I handle it with Andrea.
Well, and I'm really surprised now in retrospect that Kim didn't do a story on that, because that would have been another blow against the sheriff's department. The fact that they didn't, because really, they should have notified us, and they didn't.
Well, it was just, I mean, I'm not here to say about what they did or didn't do, I'm here to talk about strategies for dealing with communication, but it's pretty shocking how they handled that they set that whole thing up like a bunch of cowboys, and that's how it came on.
They had other more pressing problems, as we now know.
Yeah.
So, anyway. And this is a fact, 95% of crises come from day-to-day things. These are all things that are happening. So we really should be able to kind of anticipate and plan. Just sit down and think about what are the most likely crises, what are the worst-case scenarios, how will you deal with them? Make some plans around that. The first hour of a crisis is critical to the success of the response. When I get toward the end, I'm going to refresh your memory about one that happened recently. We're going to talk a little bit about it. It's not in the school realm, but it's a very public one. The same rules apply. It's good to keep a list of key players and contact info. I actually have a little card in my wallet with key phone numbers if I need to. Just in case my phone would go dead, just never know. So, spokespersons, there are different feelings on this. I like to have fewer spokespeople. I think, especially in times of high crisis, but depending on the thing. If it's someone molesting kids, that I may not have my person in front. That I may take on. But I'm trying.
That's such a good point, and here I'm interrupting again, but Chris would specifically say, Dr. Ballard, I don't want you in front of the camera talking about this. I don't want you associated with this issue. I don't want people to look at you and think about that issue. So in this particular case, I'm going to recommend that you put Gary Ruddick in front of the camera. In this particular case, I'm going to recommend that you put Tracy Bales. Those were deliberate decisions that were made between Chris and I and probably the chief of staff, probably 2 or 3 of us.
Well, and there are times when you want,
And there are times you wanted me.
there are times when you want the lead person out there. There are other times where you will be blasted by the public if they don't see the leader. They're going to say, "Where the hell is this guy?" Think about Malaysian Airlines. Remember that plane that disappeared with everyone on board? That's still a really weird thing. They kept those families in limbo for days. I mean, it was like, I felt their pain. It was like, please, somebody. That was a really complex example. But anyway, there are times when you're going to want your subject matter experts to handle things that are really specific to their area of expertise. So it's always good to train people that you think are likely going to be on the front end of some of these media interviews. You do have to be careful. The telephone game, the game where you start with the story on one end, and by the time you get to the last person, it's completely different. Sometimes the more people you have in the mix, the more likely that can happen. Just mentioning that. Talking points, I usually will sit down and just depending on what the issue is, especially if it's something where there are a lot of elements to the story, but recognizing that, like for TV, we don't have a lot of time to explain things. So in the limited time I have, I need to be able to hit these 4 or 5 things right up front. So that way, if they get nothing else, they've got that. Then you can fill in with the details. But for TV, you just don't have a lot of time. So you've got to be really concise. There are different schools of thought on this as well. In times of crisis and developing situations, think about some of the very public things that have happened. God, there's so many examples of this. There are times when disaster strikes, and you don't always have all of the facts. In this day of Twitter, where you've got people that are out there, I remember, I don't know if you guys remember this, when the team went in and executed Osama bin Laden, it was actually a civilian on Twitter that said, hey, this just went down, before any news outlet knew it. We are living in times like that, which means that reporters now are a lot less hesitant to go forward with breaking news, even when they don't know all of the facts. That's why it's really helpful to have someone who's an expert that knows that knows how to do this. And that's why when you're watching a story, and this is the danger in this, when you're watching a story, you know how sometimes, like, I think about things like, 9/11 or the Oklahoma City, the Murrah bombing. Sometimes those numbers change when they talk about, I mean, I'm sure you all have seen it, where they'll say, well, we're not really sure, we hear that 20 people are dead. You know, a lot of times those numbers change as they get more information. I would encourage you go with what you know, try to be as solid with the facts as you can. Try not to go too far, and it's okay to say, you know what, we don't know what caused this yet. We don't have a count on how many people are dead. We are still looking through the rubble. It's okay to do that. It's okay to say, you know what, we're going to have another update in an hour. A lot of times on these really breaking news things, that's what they'll do. Is they'll say, you know, we're going to update you every hour as we get new information. It's just the reality of dealing with a 24/7 news cycle today. I will say it does present. I'm gonna skip that. Part of the downside in not responding promptly. A lot of organizations are being blasted for not responding swiftly enough. Could be damaging to the organization, but it has to be a balance, because if they don't hear it from you, these days they're going to find it from somebody. And it used to be, now you're commonly seeing stories on things that were reported on Facebook. If you had asked me 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said that's not really the basis for a factual story. That day is gone. They do use that as they are combing through social media all the time. Now it's probably one of the leading sources of stories. Now you still have to vet what you're coming across. Okay, United Airlines. Let's see if I can make this go. Is everybody familiar with this? Everybody familiar with this passenger video?
Busted his lip. Oh my God! Look at what you did! Oh my God!
This is a doctor breaking on the plane. You all remember this?
Good work.
Wouldn't give up his seat.
Sit down. Oh my
Yeah, at least
goodness!
he's an older doctor.
video. This is an upsetting event to all of us here at United. I apologize for having to reaccommodate these customers. Boy, he didn't look like he was too accommodated, did he? Our team is moving with a sense of urgency to work with the authorities and conduct our own detailed review of what happened. Well, does that not sound like the biggest bunch of BS you've ever heard, if you've even watched that video? I read that statement, I went, did the PR person even watch the darn video before they wrote that? I mean, that looks like a textbook response to something they haven't seen. That's a terrible response. Would you call that authentic? No. What should they have done?
Apologize.
Somebody better get on there and go, hey, this is not how we treat our customers. Anyway. Well, then he turned around and sent this note to his employees. Dear team, like you, I was upset to see and hear about what happened last night. While the facts and circumstances are still evolving, this is not a good example of still evolving because that tape was already well out there in the public. While the facts and circumstances are still evolving, especially with respect to why this customer defied Chicago aviation security officers, the message doesn't match up with the facts. This is probably a good example of spin. Okay, so there are some that engage in this, but it's a terrible example. He was politely asked to be playing. That didn't look very polite, did it? Fly the friendly skies, boy. They're really hitting their mission, aren't they? Fly the friendly skies. Okay, I'm just trying to make a point. Good communications, things are in alignment, and you acknowledge when you've screwed up. You take your blows. It's better to do it early, and if you screw up, please admit it. Don't wait. The longer you wait, the worse it gets. It's really not that complicated. Public response here on Twitter. Nice to know reaccommodate on United now means drag you violently out of your seat. Having to reaccommodate, is that what they're calling it? Oh, they were just blasted. I haven't looked to see what their stock, I hope their stock is just plummeted.
Well, it did the next day, I think it's, I don't know, I follow
It's probably back up now, but, here's the article in Wired, How United Turned the Friendly Skies into a Flying Hellscape. Boy, that's a headline I want to see. My point is, regardless of what organization you're working for, really, our principles were all the same. That's why tomorrow I could go work in Southwest if I wanted to, with everything happening. Okay, let's talk a little bit about media strengths. We've talked a little bit about this. TV, it's excellent for visual and breaking stories. I mean, especially if there's flames, if there's somebody who's been shot and there's blood. I hate to say it, but they love, I hate this expression, if it bleeds, it leads. I really hate that. I hate it. But it is kind of a reality with our media today. TV is a challenge explaining complex issues, no time for complexities. They're best at quick sound bites. That's why it's really good to have someone like Keith Ballard who speaks naturally in sound bites. You really do. You do a really good job at that. That is almost an impossible skill to teach. It really is, but you speak in sound bites. Let's see, be prepared. We talked a little bit about this. Hands tied in terms of what we can disclose. Print media. Okay, print can be really great at complex stories. Now, the downside is people aren't reading like they used to. That's the reason why USA Today is popular, because every story is about this long. But it can be great if people want the details, they can find the details. The downside for them, they have to compete with TV and the internet. The reality is, a lot of them now, all the lines are blurring. So a lot of times, Tulsa World will actually send a guy out with a camera who's also shooting video and doing video for their online version of the story. So the lines have really, traditional lines are really gone. And now it's a race to see who's first with the story. But I would say accuracy has suffered, but I think it's the price we pay to get it quickly. Otherwise, we're relying on, because like it or not, people are seeing it on Twitter and Facebook sometimes before they get the news out. We had one incident, I mentioned a gunman at a school. I talked to a reporter, Ashley Sims, I talked to a reporter at Channel 6 afterwards. It was really fascinating. It turned out to not be a real, it turned out that the kid did not have a gun. A girl had overheard two young men on the bus, came in on the middle of a conversation. They were gamers, and I think they were kind of fantasizing about scenarios. She overheard that discussion and went, oh crap, he's got a gun and he's gonna go in there and kill everybody. And when we heard the profile on the student, it was a 16-year-old ROTC student. I mean, you kind of fill in the blanks and go, oh crap, this could be the real deal. Well, anyway, while all this was going on, it was kind of interesting. Ashley said she had think about this on your personal phone. She had over 300 phone calls and emails from people, they all have cell phones, in the building, who were calling media and texting them and telling them, hey, here's what's going on. Well, a lot of those are red herrings, and it's stuff that's not even really happening. We had one individual that called into a radio station and said, you've got the wrong guy. It's somebody else. Can you imagine sifting through all of that junk to get to what the truth is? That's why what we have is valuable. If we've got the real answers on here's what's happening inside the building, officers have secured the area, they've isolated the student, they're questioning him. If we can share that, it cuts through all the, I've said BS a lot today. There's something about working in the school environment that makes me cuss. I don't know why that is, but anyway. But it's just kind of interesting to look at from a reporter's side. I'm just trying to figure, how would you ever sift through all that to get to what is fact? Social media, we need to all be out there monitoring. Okay, this is a whole other aspect of being in school administration these days, is keeping an eye on social media. We had one parent at Union recently. Oh my God, this was, I wish I had saved screenshots of it. If I had, I would share them. She was talking about her daughter and friend who were dropped off at a bus stop. Two boys attacked them to take headphones, the real cool headphones. Beats, yes. Anyway, and they posted pictures, and this one girl, she's all bloody, she's got a black eye, saying, I can't believe this happened at Union, what was offsite. I can't believe it happened, they're not doing anything to help. Well, they didn't tell anybody that it happened, they posted the pictures immediately. Well then, it was really interesting, because I got called on it, and I thought, it was like, is there anything that we can do to help? Well, I got on there, and people were asking questions, and I love this, because finally, everybody starts out sympathizing, and then you get down, and it was really funny, because one guy goes, okay, I'm seeing blood in a black eye. Are those injuries from, because she was implying that those were injuries from the attack. And the mother goes, oh no, that's a picture from Halloween. You guys, I'm not making this up. That is a picture from Halloween. She was a vampire, and we put black eyes and had blood running down. And I sent her a text, and I said, or an instant message, and I said, can you pull that down? I said, it's implying that these are injuries that she got from today. And she said, oh, I was just showing it to show how much shorter my daughter was than the other girl, and she was really small to be beat up. And anyway, so much stuff happens on social media, and people really don't think before they post stuff like that. But you should be out there looking at it, because there are a lot of people out there that just want to post ugly stuff, and there are times when you need to try to have it removed. There are other times, I mean, it just kind of varies with the territory, and it is important to have a social media policy. This is one that we developed for TPS. It was the more Facebook-friendly version. It's a family-friendly page. Please do not use offensive language. And we were real clear about, if you don't behave appropriately, then we may pull your comment down. Some things that we can do to kind of control that. And if you disclose it up front, it's okay. Sometimes it's best not to remove things. It just kind of depends. Sometimes the audience takes care of itself. A lot of times you'll get parents will chime in and go, that's not true. So I don't know if you've seen that. Sometimes it ends up being kind of self-policing. Just some other little things to know. Be careful in saying to any reporter that something is off the record. There are reporters that respect that, and there are others, frankly, if I didn't want it in print, I wouldn't say it.
Or write it.
Or write it. I have friends in the news media. I have great relationships with news media. But the bottom line is their allegiance primarily is to their employer. Their job is to get a story. So just recognize that something may seem like a friendship, but the reality is they have a job to do. And 9 times out of 10, they'll do things that will help you, but there are times when they may do something that's harmful. But they're not your enemy. I would never say they're your enemy. There are some people who would argue with that. But I would not assume an adversarial relationship. Ways to say no comment. Really, never say no comment. That's a popular thing in the movies, the guy running down the courthouse stairs and no comment, and it's really kind of a stereotype. There are other ways to say it without saying the words no comment. Many times I'll say, we can't give you a lot of specifics right now, and it's okay, because a lot of times they will ask you things that you don't have answers for yet. You know what, I'm gonna check on that, can I give you a call later? There's nothing wrong with that. We're not omniscient, we're not all-knowing. So they understand that. We can't provide you that information because it would be a violation of employee confidentiality. This slide is just to say that there is a need for people to do this kind of work, because they may be suspicious of what we do sometimes. They need us, because sometimes we're the only way to directly get what's going on in an organization when other people don't want to talk to them. Embargoes, I don't know if you guys are familiar with those. That's when you have news to announce, where you might say, hey, we're going to share this with you early, but it's embargoed until 3 p.m. tomorrow. Usually it's pretty safe to do that. I did have one instance, oh, it was terrible. I had one instance with the Tulsa World when they broke the embargo, and it was not pretty. Usually it's not a problem. At the time, it was caused because they had different staff working on online stories. The embargo was with the print version, and the online folks didn't know that, and they ran it. And it was news about our publicly held company that was released while the stock market was open, which is highly illegal. It caused a lot of problems. Anyway, you have to complete all kinds of paperwork with the Security and Exchange Commission. So anyway, and you have to, and timing is always difficult when you do embargoes. You will get people, you will get media, sometimes, God, this is so tough. There are times when you do want to go to certain outlets first. There are some folks that will tell you, well, it's really better if everybody gets it at the same time. To me, there are times when a certain outlet may do better with a certain type of story, and those are the ones that I will give it too early. There's no hard and true rule on that. Spin, we talked a little bit about that, but spin is propaganda that relies on deceptive methods of persuasion. It's what we're seeing play out every day with I'm not gonna mention names, but our president is doing that a lot. Seems like it's almost always political in nature. If you don't really need it, that's what's crazy. It's not real. All it causes is people to question everything that you say. I think that we're seeing that kind of play out in our political landscape today. Real PR is about transparency. Yes, we do try to show our organization in the best light, but if something bad happens, you gotta acknowledge it. You were talking about, when I came in, you guys were talking about the budget and stuff. One thing that we put together as a union in anticipation of the budget year that we knew we were gonna have this year with the shortfall is we went out and we thought the public would find it helpful to know, here are the real facts on where we are with the budget and the fact that education has taken a hit since 2008 that we never really recovered from, and there have been continual cuts since then. Well, it was quite interesting. So we did that. Dr. Hartzler did an editorial.
It was a great.
Nap time is over. Boy, they didn't like that, but it got some attention.
I loved it.
It's just interesting that, and you were mentioning David Blatt, 3/4 of the numbers that were in this came from him. He's
David Blatt's the greatest.
very reliable. According to a recent senior poll, Oklahomans have identified education as the #1 funding priority. Well, why did it take the entire legislative session before they even really did anything to even try to address it? I find it really shocking. Find it very shocking. But what's really interesting is this little brochure caused. I've never done a brochure that caused a lot of issues. We actually had one senator that questioned our facts on these, and we gathered. I sent him all the sources and said, here they are. They were all third-party sources. It was not information we created. It's stuff that we compiled that was all from valid sources. He turned around. I'm not going to mention his name, but he turned around and sent an email to all of the parents at Darby Elementary who they were at we had some kind of a gathering where they distributed this, and he proceeded to share all kinds of misinformation. I mean, it was information, I read it and I laughed because it wasn't even internally consistent. I mean, he had 3 different figures for the same thing in one email, and I thought, okay, well, this is just really weird. And his numbers were complete. I don't know where he got his numbers. And then he went and turned around and had this little brochure. He was walking around and sticking it on doors with misinformation. I mean, it's so to say that they don't always tell the truth. They don't always tell the truth. And he said, well, my sources are the staff, the legislative staff. And it's like, oh, well, they really know, because all these numbers are BS. So anyway, well, we talked about this already, but it's best to apologize. Sometimes you will get attorneys that say, oh, no, don't apologize. That's going to be admitting fault. It's going to open you up to a lawsuit. Well, I'll tell you what, that Asian guy that was dragged off the airline didn't get an apology until days later. And it was after he filed suit. Now, maybe if they had made an apology before it happened, before that happened, maybe he would have had a change of heart. I wouldn't have, but maybe he, you don't treat people like that. I mean, that's just crazy. So I don't, that's one of those areas where I don't always agree with the attorneys. I think you should take your lumps and potentially kill it before they decide to see your butt. And the public can be very forgiving. I mean, think about, oh my gosh, I mean, I feel like Tiger Woods and the womanizing, and there have been so many examples of people who have been quick to take responsibility, others that, you know, have taken weeks and months and even fabricated stories about what happened. That's not ever good. So anyway, I probably need to remove this. It's a really old example. Does anybody remember Food Lion? They were the one that 2020 did the big report on about how they were taking chicken and bleaching it. It was chicken that was beyond its expiration date, and they were bleaching it so it looked like it was fresh. Boy, that's a recipe for some chicken I'm gonna eat. I don't know about you all. So you can't do that kind of stuff if you're not gonna be in business. I mean, that's why that kind of stuff just doesn't work. News releases, there are a lot of people that will say, you guys know what a news release is, I'm assuming. It's a piece of paper that has a lot of information about here's what's happening, or here's this program that we're doing, and here's some data, here's some facts. There are a lot of people that say, oh, that's dead. Well, we still use them all the time, and they're still used frequently by news media. It's a good way to share factual information. Press conferences, I try to hold those on things that are really actually newsworthy. In the agency realm, I often had clients that wanted to do news conferences for things that really no one gave a flip about. And sometimes just because they're paying you, you go ahead and do it. And then when no one shows, you can say, well, I kind of said we didn't need to do one. So anyway, but you just need to do things that are newsworthy. Surveys. I just wanted to mention this in passing. That was something that was very helpful when we did Project Schoolhouse. We went out and solicited a lot of opinion on what do you think about this? What do you think about this possible configuration for a school? What would you think about having K through 8 in a school? Or what would you think about having K through 5 and moving 6th grade into middle school? The best way to know is to ask them and survey them, announce the results. I always think it's important to share the results as soon as you get them. It's just media love numbers, and if you have numbers that show something important, it can just be relevant. That's very newsworthy, and that's why Project Schoolhouse passed, because we did about 4 really gigantic surveys that really every step of the way told us, ooh, we need to change this, or oh, we need to consider this. Even at the 11th hour, we made decisions based on something that had not been considered before, that someone in the public said, hey, have you thought about, we had that one school that we had an 11th hour decision where we went, you know what, we're not gonna close that one, we're gonna do this other one instead. Yes?
As you're talking about surveys, some people may not know this. SurveyMonkey is really an inexpensive way to conduct those.
It's great.
And the nice thing is, if you're on the administrative side of things, you can actually go through, when we did our 4-day week, we did surveys to the general public. And I wanted to throw out, if somebody just got on there and said, no, I wanted to throw them out because those aren't valid responses. That we wanted only, one per person in the household. So 6 people live there, give us 6, that's fine. But SurveyMonkey will show you the IP address it came from and how long it took them to answer that survey.
And you can limit it and say, I only want 1 per IP address.
Right, and so when we saw that there were some that were on there for 3 seconds, we just discounted those immediately. So it gives you real, actual, good, solid data, not somebody getting on there and manipulating like you think could happen.
Well, and I need to be probably careful. I am really, I'm very picky about surveys, and there was a recent one that was done, I'm not gonna mention school district. There was a recent one that was done where I thought it was a terrible survey. It said it was asking for public input, but you could tell that they had front-loaded it with the responses that they wanted people to check. And usually if you have a long list of things that you want people to, which of these things are you okay with? Usually you should randomize those, so that way people aren't just picking the top 5 things. And they had purposely front-loaded it. I mean, I could tell when I read it, it was like, kind of front-loaded it with the things you wanted people to pick, because it's pretty obvious. So that to me is not a real credible way of doing, if you're gonna do surveys, do them in a credible way. I looked at it and I thought it was an inexperienced person that did the survey. So sometimes it's smart to hire an expert in that. Okay, well that is it for me. Any comments, questions?
Quick questions, we need to take a break and we need to move on pretty quick, and that was very thorough. But does anybody have a question for Chris? We had questions, we went on the way. I just would like to thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
And
You're welcome.
that was very helpful.